Okay, good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rich Lyons, Dean of the Haas School here, and it's a special event today, of course, not only due to this esteemed speaker that we have and friend of the school, and it's also not only because this is the first of our Dean Speaker Series for the year, but also because this is the very first speaker event we've had in this beautiful event space here called this. It is, in fact, called the Speaker Forum. You have no idea how hard it was to find a donor for this space with the last name Speaker, okay? Look, we want you to get all you can out of this wonderful inaugural event. It's one of our strongest speakers, and for those who've not attended in the past, you know, it is our highest profile talk that we give, and we have wonderful guests and have in the past. There's sometimes international, of course, national, local, and we know something about our gifted speaker today and how much impact he's had. We like our speakers to come at things from many different angles, of course. And today is no exception. So it is my pleasure to welcome and introduce our speaker today. He really is, as you know, an incomparable business leader whose leadership at Cisco has spanned some 3 decades. I have a little more to say, but please join me in a warm welcome, Mr. John Chambers. John, thank you. John, thank you for being here. Let me just say a few things very quickly. The relationship between this business school and Cisco is long and very, very deep. It is also UC Berkeley-wide. There's some 700 UC Berkeley alums who work at Cisco. There are nearly 200 Haas alums that work at Cisco. Year after year, they're one of our top recruiters. That won't surprise anybody, both at the undergraduate level and at the MBA level. We look forward, of course, to continuing that relationship. It's a critical one for us. A little bit more on John, and then we'll get rolling. He joined Cisco in 1991 as Senior Vice President of Worldwide Sales and Operations. Became President and CEO 4 years later, 1995, and he served as both Chairman and CEO starting in 2006, and he had both of those roles from 2006 to 2015. He serves as the executive chairman of the board. He is very much a working chairman. It was announced just Monday, I think, of this week that he would be rotating out of that role and that Chuck Robbins, the current CEO, would take over the executive chair role. In his time at Cisco, John helped the company grow from $70 million in sales when he first joined to $47 billion in sales when he stepped down as CEO. He also made a staggering 180 acquisitions in the span of 20 years. You can do the math. You got to be busy to do that. So the integration of companies is obviously something he and Cisco are great at. He's been recognized by his peers in many, many different ways. Time magazine named him to their list of 100 most influential people. Best boss in America by 2020. CEO of the year by Chief Executive Magazine. There are many, many others. He was awarded France's National Defense Gold Medal for global leadership, and he's the only foreign business leader to ever receive that award in its 35-year history. When we open it up to Q&A, we'll want to use the microphones. We turn it over now to our friend John Chambers. Thank you, John.
Rich, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be back with you. I was here 6.5 years ago, and how things have changed. The speed of change has never been faster nor more exciting. But my worry is the education system has to keep up with that speed of change, or there'll be disruption in jobs in a negative way. If you walk out of this give and take today with one thing that will really help you in your future career, I've accomplished my role. If you agree with everything I say today, I will have failed miserably. And if at least once or twice I don't make you a little bit uncomfortable with what I'm saying, then I'm not pushing the envelope like you have to push it in your future business careers. How many of you are MBA students? Gotcha. How many are undergraduate? How many people just snuck into the session? Got it. I'll be there with you. So you're about to see the speed that I called the internet era from 1990 to 2010, and it changed business dramatically, but it was a 20-year change. And when I first started to say Cisco, synonymous with the internet, would change the way you work, live, learn, and play, people said, great marketing, right? But you're a router company. It did change. Digitization, which started in 2010 and will be a 20-year run as well, will change at 3 times to 5 times the pace, but it also will have 3 to 5 times the impact, both good and bad. So my role today is kind of talk about how you do innovation in this new world. And the way that I like to do it, and when I, as a business person, I like to outline a vision. I never make my first move on the chessboard. I played it out to the end. I learned that from Henry Kissinger. I have a primary game, a secondary game, a third, and you plan everything and almost write your press release before you make your first move. What I didn't anticipate was how fast these markets would change, and I like to back the facts with detail to illustrate the points which I'm about to do in a moment. Now, in questions. When you're in front of the press and somebody asks you a real emotional question, a tough one, how do you answer it? With facts. You're in front of the press and they ask you a real tough question with facts that you don't necessarily like. How do you answer it? With emotion. It works 90% plus of the time, and it's amazing how many people don't think about that. But what's the timing here? I only went on one public board. I went into Walmart. Tremendous culture, great direction, vision strategy, all the right things, management, the largest company in the world, and good people. And I learned so much from them. We saw Amazon coming, but we didn't grasp the fundamental business model change, the change in consumer buying behaviors, and how quickly this is going to happen. It took 21 years for the market capitalization of Walmart to be eclipsed by Amazon. Tesla. Clearly GM and Ford saw them coming. A new business model. How long did it take them to overtake GM's market cap? 14 years. Uber, and we all understand it has strengths and limitations. And we'll talk about culture later, because that one's clearly broken on culture. But how long did it take their market cap to pass Tesla's? 7. Now you know where I'm going. The next transitions will be a company that you may not even anticipate passing your company in 3.5 years. So the speed of change is going to be something that will shock us all. And the technology is going to enable that at a very fast pace. Whoops, sorry. You can tell one of my many weaknesses, I'm a very impatient person. And typical male characteristic, I punch the thing 3 or 4 times when it doesn't move. Okay. The digital age. At the heart of this, it will transform everything in our lives, mainly for the better. We're going to live longer. We're going to change business process, etc. It is enabled by the Internet of Things. When Cisco was founded, 1,000 devices connected to the Internet, to about 17 billion today, to 500 billion in a decade. It will enable getting that right information at the right time, the right person or right machine to dramatically change your effectiveness of your decisions. Security must encompass it all, as we saw with the most recent security issues that just got hit in terms of the direction. And it is very simple. Whether it's in your entertainment, your healthcare, or your business, or your customer purchasing behavior, right information at the right time to make the decision. Why do companies succeed or fail? The number one transition. They forget the customers, number 3. Number 1 is they miss a market transition. One of your colleagues asked earlier, John, you worked at Wang, now you're at Cisco. Why did Wang fail? Why was Cisco successful? The answer is Dr. Wang, most brilliant man I've ever met in my life, invented magnetic core memory walking across the Harvard quad, humble as could be, zeros and ones. I was his tennis opposition, and he was just a great man. He did 5 transitions, and he missed the transition from mini computers to the PC and the internet. The company failed. Cisco has gotten market transition right after market transition after market transition, but there's no entitlement. If we miss the next market transition, we'll become like the Nortels of the world and the Lucents and the Alcatels, either out of business or a shadow of what they are. First thing you've got to do is get market transitions right. They can be technology or business models. The second thing you've got to do is, What I was taught in MBA school at Indiana, and boy, I love this school. And I went to school for 9.5 years. It was the most valuable process I've ever been through in the business school side of the house. But I was taught, how do you do the right thing 3 to 5% better every year? In this new world, that is a kiss of death. You can't continue to do the right thing again and again and again for too long. You've got to reinvent yourself, and who's the most difficult person in the organization to get them to change and reinvent themselves? The CEO. It's great when change happens to you, not when it happens to me. Your issue on customers, getting too far away from customers and not understanding their customer expectations have changed. What percentage of CEOs believe that they deliver tremendous customer experience versus their competitors? Now remember, buying today is largely commodity in many areas, many things you do. What percentage of the CEOs think they deliver superior customer service, differentiated? And remember, 75% of consumers will say they buy on how they're treated by the company. 80% believe they've got superior customer service. What do you think as a consumer? You buy that? No. 8% of consumers think any of their companies deliver it. So you miss customer expectations, you get left behind. And the other thing is entitlement. Just because you've been GM or Cisco or Microsoft doesn't mean you're entitled. In fact, actually works against you, overconfidence. And that's what gets you into trouble as quickly as anything else. Shimon Peres, I'll probably refer to him several times, one of the most creative leaders I've ever met. He literally had the capability, much like Modi in India does today, to see trends, to inspire a vision, which gets you to hope. Take hope to be impossible. Take impossible to be improbable, and then produce results. Shimon Peres did that in Israel, first in terms of defense of the nation. Then 10 years later, we turned around the economy of the nation. Then 10 years later, focused on peace. But he taught me to always think exponentially. And I met with him for 17 years. He wandered into a session I was doing at the World Economic Forum. I was over in a sidebar talking about the internet, and I thought he was in the wrong room. He understood in the early 90s the internet would change Israel and the world. But he taught me to think like a teenager. He taught me always to think exponentially. If you're thinking linearly, you're probably going to get beat in what you do in life. This time I'll be more patient as I go up. What did Cisco do that was fundamental versus our peers that allowed us to be successful when none of our competitors from 15 years ago even exist or are still in the market? And we had great ones, similar peers, Cabletron, Synoptics, Wellfleet. IBM came at us, Dell came at us, Intel came at us. And what we did that others did not do is we got market transitions right. And they could be either technology or customer buying, consumer expectations. Second thing is there's only one Steve Jobs. I knew him well. Really good guy in some ways, tough guy in others. His book was pretty accurate. But he was one of a kind in just knowing what the consumer wanted. Us mere mortals can't do that. What we're very good at Cisco is we listen to the customer. Customers told me there's a new technology called Fast Ethernet. I was at Ford Motor Company. And it's not going to be ATM to desktop like all the experts thought. I was a little bit embarrassed. I said, can you explain to me what Fast Ethernet is? 2 weeks later, I'm at Boeing. Boeing says, you know, John, we don't think ATM to desktop's going to take off like everybody thinks. I said, I couldn't agree with you more. Fast Ethernet's the way to go. And they went, wow. I said, can I have my water? And they said, no, you got to go buy a company called Crescendo. I bought the company, $92 million for something, $10 million in revenue. Stock went down. Fast forward 20-some years, $13 billion in revenue, 60% market share. Listening to customers. Then what we did is we stole from GE, and I think you always want to benchmark, and the ultimate form of a compliment is to take what somebody else does and do it even better. The ideal being number one or number two. But we took no prisoners in this. We said one or two with 40% market share. audacious, unachievable goal for every product we went after. Number 1 or number 2, minimum 40% market share. And we did that in 12 of our major products out of 18. Number 2 in 3, and number 3 in 3. But we set audacious goals, and then we brought these products together in architectures which allow us to produce outcomes quicker than anybody else. And before our competitors had it, it was game over. Because they were coming at us with individual products. We were coming out with product fleet. We then combined the products together in architectures, and they let us get too far out in front of them. That's how we did innovation. Then we developed a replicatable playbook that you can run again and again on almost every innovation move we made. From it's how do you do 199 acquisitions, to how you do number 1 and number 2 in each product area, to how you do corporate social responsibility, to how you do digitization. So again, when you think about the companies you work for, or if you're in a startup, what you do, understand market transitions, understand customer-driven, and how are you going to do innovation to differentiate yourself in the market. And the more you can make it replicatable, you can move at speed your peers do not. We never competed against a competitor. I would get all over my team when they did that, because when you compete with a competitor, what's the problem with that? You forget about the customer? What's the other problem with it?
You forget about what other market opportunities there could be.
Perhaps.
Solving their own problem?
Yes. You're solving the problem that they saw 2 years ago. When you compete against a competitor, you're saying, where are they today? And they got to where they are today by what they did 2 to 3 years ago. West Virginia terms, you're driving down the country roads that are very curvily. If you go off the road, you're dead, and you're looking out your rearview mirror. You can't do that. You have to focus on market transitions, in my opinion. This is controversial. Always, every move we made was off a market transition. Routing, going to switching, Boeing and Ford. Voice coming to the internet. And you can imagine, I probably worded it wrong. I said, voice will be free, when 30% of my business was from service providers. And I said, where you get 110% of your profits and 90% of your revenue, not only will commoditize, it will be free. But it was, and it did. And Nortel and Lucent and Alcatel, who didn't move, got left behind. The ability to fast forward to today about digitization and a digital world, with digital Israel, digital France, digital India, being the key objective of the country leader. The ability to compete in that in a way your peers cannot in terms of direction. And this innovation playbook that goes again and again, and replicatable process, whether it's from acquisitions or digitization. We run the same 12 plays on digitization. We just prioritize it based on what the country leader says to you. The ability to see things before others do. Now, you're right, I have not changed since that picture in the mid-90s. Maybe a little bit less hair. On stage, President Clinton, I'm a moderate Republican, an endangered species, especially here in California. But I'm on stage with President Clinton, and we outline a vision of what the internet's future could be and how it would change the country. Nobody really understood the implications of it, but he did. Good friend to this day. He was able to connect the dots like Shimon Peres did. Understand it could create huge GDP growth, huge per capita income growth, huge job creation. I was scared to death. I was on the stage representing business and the partnership, and I just became CEO. Fast forward the end 2000, 22.5 million new jobs, 34% growth in GDP, and the last time America got a raise, 24% average income household increase in America. Same opportunity presents itself in the digital world, but even more in terms of the challenges potentially on the downside. This is an environment that noticed how we launched the partnership in the US. When we launched this in France, with France strategically partnering with Cisco in a way they never had done with any company, much less an American company after Snowden. And I was all pumped up. The president and I said, we're going to announce this in the Palace Steps. Our team said, are you crazy? We're going to launch it by social media. France, the last place in the world you do business. Great place to visit, great place to vacation. 2.5 years. I believe in setting audacious goals. I said France would become the best place to do business, and it would become the startup nation of Europe. And even my best friend said, John, are you crazy? You must be losing it. France? Guess what was the #1 startup engine of all of Europe last year? France. They went from an average of 120 companies per year funded by venture capitalists in high tech to 486 in 2.5 years. Macron is as good as you hear. Alain, his predecessor, was the one that we dreamed it together. Valls was the operational guy, the prime minister. Macron was the economic minister. Macron and I actually taught classes in France to MBA classes like you all, together on stage. He's been to my home to understand startups. He gets it. Modi outlined a digital India where he has to create 1.1 million new jobs per month and change 1.3 billion people. And we were his partner, Cisco, and I was his partner in terms of the business leader on how this changes. What's your takeaway? How is this relevant? Get market transitions right. Have the courage to big dream. Shimon Peres, he gets criticized for his dreams. In fact, his granddaughter said, you hurt my father, my grandfather. And she was referring to the press. But if you don't dream big, you will never achieve greatness. And there is no success usually without the pain of failure. The ability to think, where does this take you in terms of markets? And to realize this inflection point has occurred. To realize how fast it's going to change in ways we're just beginning to understand. To understand the implications where almost every CEO in the world now knows they've got to become digital. And yet less than 25% of them, especially after the second glass of wine, will tell you they have a good plan to get there. I'm at Barrick Gold this next week. Mining is the worst productivity industry there is, even worse than healthcare. John Thornton, their chairman, is going to make Barrick Gold a digital company. He's going to take the price and cost to produce an ounce of gold from $800 probably to all the way down to $500. He'll become the most profitable company in his industry. He'll absorb his other players. A vision that is grandiose, a partnership on how he's going to get there. What's the challenges to becoming digital? You got to think like a startup. Most large companies struggle with that. And even startups don't get very comfortable. You've got to reinvent yourself at even faster pace than before. Second challenge is breaking down the silos. This is about outcomes, how you go across the silos to get those outcomes. This is about how you get the group. And my MBA school and the classes I went through, look at the person on your right and on your left. You better beat them or you'll be out. Now the three of you have to work seamlessly together, even though your personalities and your aspirations might be differently. Breaking down those silos between the organization. Companies under pressure, what do? You put your best resources on, get me this quarter results and this next couple months results. Every decision I made as CEO was what was right 3 to 5 years out. The market doesn't let you do that anymore. So your temptation will be, as a leader of a startup or otherwise, because your venture capitalists are going to be after you, tell me again when we can go public, when I get to cash out, is not to take your best resources and put it on this digitization, because you need them to get this quarter's results and this year's results. Linear, not exponential thinking. And the CEO, she or he has to lead in terms of the direction. Opportunity, $19 trillion. I didn't know what 19 trillion really meant when we did the data on this. It's simply the size of the US economy plus some. That translated on a global basis means 2 to 4% GDP growth incrementally for every country if they do this right. Unbelievable opportunity. The challenges, however, are also equally as big. And you see a digital world, and this is this replication model, where a country like Israel had the courage to be the most advanced technology country in the world, the most independent, had learned, and rightly so, never to depend on somebody else for your success, because the world would let you down. And yet they partner with Cisco. Shimon Peres, when I outlined the dream to him, and I said, here's what's possible. He said, John, I think we should do this. I said, Shimon, you need to know if this doesn't work, it will hurt you personally and you'll take a big hit. He said, you never achieve anything worthwhile unless you're willing to dream and realize that it has a chance of failure. And then he did something unique. He said, the other thing is, John, you can accomplish anything as long as you don't care who gets credit. He said, you've got to go get my political opposition, Netanyahu, on board, and you've got to get the third party on board. And all three parties agreed this was the future of Israel. France, the economic achievement. They are becoming the economic engine, blew right past the UK and probably right past Germany in a very unique way. And Modi, digital India. Now, if you can do this for countries, imagine what you can do for a company. How many of you want to be a part of a startup? A little bit higher. How many of you want to go to an established company? How many of you just want to stay in school and have fun like I did? Me too. But as you go into it for both groups, you've got to think exponentially. You've got to say, what is your sustainable differentiation? You've got to say, where are you going in the market? And be realistic. This is why Rich and I are both so passionate about education. Almost every job in the future will require technology skills. Now, we in the Valley get all hung up on this, and make no mistake, we're out of touch with mid-America. My 2-year-old granddaughter, many years ago, she stole her mom's iPhone. She watched what her security code was, 2 years old. She got the iPhone, used the security code, and went into applications. I said to my son, early admissions to Haas. He laughed. He said, Dad, every 2-year-old does this. The point being, in this digital world with a device capable of interfacing to this, everyone doesn't have to be a programmer. You've got to be able to use the gateways into this new world very effectively. We did network academies. We trained 1.2 million students a year globally in 180 countries, probably the best corporate give back program there is. We've won every major corporate social responsibility award there is almost everywhere in the world. We won the top award in America from a Democratic leader in basically Obama and Hillary Clinton, and we won it from Bush and Condi Rice. This might be even better because Prime Minister Valls of France said, John, by the time we get our diverse group of our population, and especially women, focused on technology, it's too late. Can you figure out a way to do this for the 10 to 14-year-olds? And I love to be customer-driven, but I went out of that meeting, the World Economic Forum, and I went, shit, I have no idea how to do this. Fast forward 6 months, Dream Impossible Dreams. We now have what we call the Digital Entrepreneurial Program, Global Problem Solvers. We do it with action item heroes and animation. We get people excited early. It isn't about technology. It's about how do you solve problems and teach teamwork. And we took it into 2 economically depressed areas and 1 very affluent area. Student scores were the same. The young women in particular who used to sit toward the back of the classroom and would often say, my ideas aren't that important, and the boys would say the same thing, suddenly understood their ideas were important and they learned how to work together. If you notice this picture, notice who's at the very front. This is young women. You have to capture your imagination of your youth, not in college because it's too late. You've got to capture it in the 10 to 14-year-old groups. Key trends, you all know this. Artificial intelligence everywhere, machine learning. You're just seeing scratch the surface of it, both on the good and the bad. You're seeing the Internet of Things, 500 billion devices in 10 years really coming together. You're seeing the physical and digital world completely blur on it in terms of direction. Here's what Cisco does, our digital strategy. It isn't so important that every company has to do it this way, but you've got to have a digital strategy that has the power to do it. And you've got to say, how is this not 50 billion devices like most people are talking about? That's a rounding error. We're already at 17 billion. How do you do it with 500 billion devices? And what are the security implications as you do this, and how do you work through it? And security is going to get much worse. The breaches you've seen are nothing compared to what has occurred. It's only a matter of time till a drone is flown over and drops something on a government building or coliseum. What you saw at Equifax, really hard. Organized crime is focused on cyber. It's like Jesse James, why do you rob banks? That's where the money is. Why is organized crime in the world focused on the cyber? Because there's more benefit economically in cyber than there is in the traditional areas. Security is a must as you move forward. Our rules for acquisition. Today, 90% of our peers' acquisitions fail, and 2/3 of ours hit or exceed what we set with our board of directors within 2 years. It's because we have a playbook that we don't violate. You catch markets in transitions. You don't acquire a company that has a different culture, because if you have a different culture or a different view of where the industry is going, it will collide. Geographic proximity is huge, and you must be able to retain the acquisition. What? Not the company. When Nations Bank bought Bank of America, were they buying people? They were buying geography and customer sets. You've got to be able to keep the people, because that generates your next generation product. Our attrition rate of our acquired companies runs 4 to 5% in an industry that runs 20. Get that replicatable playbook into the vocabulary of how you go forward. And while we get excited on digitization about the technology, that's the easy part. It's how do you change the organization culture of a company or a business school? And how do you create that culture that has the staying power? But it isn't culture or organization or technology we're after, is it? What you're here today is to say, how do I do innovation at tremendous speed? And that's what business leadership will be about in the future. Our competitors on the left, and they were great companies. And it wasn't a given Cisco was going to win. Wang, same thing for 30 years. Missed one transition, we were gone. Same thing will happen to Cisco if we don't execute right. It's the ability to realize, however, that job growth in large companies will probably be non-existent over the next decade. It will all be small business and startups. This is why my next chapter of my life is going to be focused on that environment. Because digitization will unfortunately destroy 30 to 50% of the jobs as we know them today. If you don't create a much faster engine of job creation and job growth, you're going to have social disruption. And it's also just ethically wrong. So my next chapter is going to be about startup companies, startup nations, and a startup world, where I meet probably 20 to 30 times a month with startups. I had a meeting already this morning. And sometimes it's one-on-one, sometimes it's 2,000 people and talking on direction. In Israel, it was about Shimon's dream. Startups, inclusion, geographic. When I was there a week ago, I met with 3 Arab startups, 2 Orthodox Jewish startups, 1 Palestinian startup, and 3 women CEO startups. The dream of inclusion is true. But you've got to help it, and you've got to have the courage to take the risk. And there is no guarantee that I survive as a leader or that Cisco does. And believe me, when you do things well, people will say nice things about you. And then when you have a bump, they'll say how much of an idiot you were. That is part of the territory. And I wish I could tell you get used to that. You never do. When people that you trust turn on you. But that's part of leadership too. Last takeaway I'm going to leave you with. Are you a product more of your successes as a leader, or product more of your challenges? Your parents, I guarantee you, were more concerned about how you handled your setbacks in life, and they would have done anything to get you through those, than they were about your successes. And great leaders do both. Common characteristic of great leaders: vision, the ability to take hope and make it occur, and curiosity. Startups, it's exciting. It's not good in our trend in the US. We normally have 200 to 250 startups go public a year on NASDAQ. Last year it was 95, this year it's going to be slightly over 100. If startups are the tip of the iceberg on what occurs, the tip of the iceberg, this is going to be a problem for job creation 5 to 10 years from now. We have to, if unfortunately job destruction happens, it's not how do we get back to 250 IPOs on the NASDAQ as the tip of the iceberg. It's how do you get back to 400 to 500. If you agree with everything I've said I've failed, this is my criteria when I invest in a startup, and it isn't the money they're after. It's coaching the CEO, it's becoming not part of their management team, but almost, and it's helping them through it. What I look for first, no surprise to you, market transition. What I look for second, a world-class CEO who wants to be coached. What do I look through third? number 1 and number 2 with 40% market share. Audacious goals. And then I look, do they have the lighthouse customers? Do they have the Walmart? Or do they have the State Farm? Or do they have the Barrick Gold? Then I look at where they are in the inflection point in the market. Do they have sustainable relevance? And then I look, interestingly enough, at their board. Not who are the VC companies, but who are the partners on the board and how good are they to be able to help the team through it. So what you see is a replicatable innovation model for everything I do. Was this worthwhile? Yes. Did you learn one thing maybe? Yep. Did you agree with everything I said? I hope not. Because I wasn't controversial enough if you did. So let's open it up to questions. Anything's fair game, and you'll find I'll deal with really tough questions that are factual with emotion, and really tough questions that are emotional with facts, and questions that I don't want to answer. Thank you. Please.
John, thanks for your time. My name is Patrick.
Patrick, it's a pleasure.
I'm hoping you can go deeper on your experience at Wang Laboratories in the context of this, learning from successes and failures. I enjoyed reading your Wikipedia because I learned some new facts about your experience at Wang that made me think differently about the $8 million that I burned in my last startup.
Yes.
Specifically, it sounds like you took the VP of operations job when there was $2 billion in profit, and when you left, there was a $700 million loss and a year or two away from bankruptcy.
I would use different facts, but yes.
And so I'm curious how that experience set you up to enter Cisco at a senior role and then be CEO in 5 years.
It's a great one. To answer the last question very directly first, I came to Cisco with the firm commitment I'd become CEO. In 2 years, it took 4. And I came when there were only 400 people on it. What it did was taught me even more than IBM. I was with IBM before that. They should have owned the technology industry. They became arrogant. They focused on financial results, got too far away from the customers. Dr. Wang did, as I alluded earlier, 5 market transitions. He missed the PC and the internet. And you say, how did somebody that smart miss it? He didn't miss it at all. He built the first PC 5 years ahead of what Microsoft and IBM did. But he didn't understand it wasn't about building a smarter, easier to use mini computer. He didn't have the applications. And nobody understood why you had to pay $20,000 for that type of device. My mistake was I was the newest member of his management team, and I'd been there 8 years. That's why you've got to constantly reinvent and bring in new ideas, both youth-wise and from other companies. And Dr. Wang was a great friend, trusted me. He gave me Asia Pacific to run. I was sure that I could do it well. I had no idea what I was doing. I had 12 major geographies, 10 of which were losing money. 1 was break-even and 1 was making money. They reported R&D into me, and I had no R&D experience. But I felt I could do it, and I did. And it took me about 9 months to turn around all operations except 1. I found at that time it's about building teams and then how do you install culture. And then when I went back to Dr. Wang, the only time he ever got mad at me ever was when I told him we had to move from mini computers and software to the PC and the internet. And his hand was shaking. He was so upset with me. He was a great man. But it was the only time I really aggravated him that much. What was my mistake? He trusted me. I should have pushed him harder. So at Wang experience, and I went to Cisco, and we almost combined with another company right before I became CEO, an equal. For me, it would have been the kiss of death. The culture was different. They promised me I'd be the CEO of the combined companies. It would have been twice as big. But I did not believe in mergers among equals. And I did not believe in putting together companies that had different cultures. And I stood in front of that freight train, and I got run over twice. But without the Wang experience, I would have never had the courage to get back up and go again a 3rd time. So $8 million startup, you take the risk. Do you know the startup that I got burned on the most in the press about how did I miss you? Did any of you, I'm not sure you have a flip camera? Remember how good that device was? I mean, it was hot. What happened? I bought it for $600 million. I missed the transition. It isn't about the camera. It's about flip share in a cloud and sharing video. If I would have taken that and put it out to every smartphone, we'd have it out of Apple to Apple. Steve Jobs got on stage, held up the flip camera and said, "This is a great device." My team said, "See?" And I go, "Watch what comes next." He said, "I'm going to give it to you for free." I folded the company in 6 months. $600 million. I get beat up on that today. Do you think I have any regrets? No. I wish I'd dreamed bigger, and I wish I'd been smart enough to realize it was flip, share in the cloud that was our differentiation. You have to have the courage to take risk. Now, nobody ever writes that doesn't even make our top 20 acquisitions. And nobody ever writes that the same year I did a $2.7 and a $3.1 billion acquisition, which were tremendously successful. That's leadership. And you just have to get used to it. So you probably get more credit than you deserve when things go well, and you actually get the heat when it goes the other way. But the Valley understands better than anywhere else, and this is what the discussion was in France. I said, your country has to learn to fail. Because when you fail in France, you never got a second chance. And I said, you have to have a culture that accepts that. Next question. Please.
Hey, John.
Hi.
My name is Brett, and I'm a first-year MBA here.
Uh-huh.
I'm curious. I think a lot of us know your decision not to run for re-election at Cisco. And in seeing that there's a transition in the leadership at Cisco,
Yeah.
and you've talked a lot about the importance of culture. We're also facing a transition here with Dean Lyons leaving the helm of the business school. I'm wondering if you can speak to us about preserving culture with changes in leadership and how other individuals outside of the senior leadership can help to maintain that. So,
Did the dean ask you to ask that question?
He did not.
You know, the fun part is we had that exact discussion. And the culture is everything. If you really look at it, and we went back and forth on culture, and this is the founding principles. Question the status quo, confidence without attitude, students always, and beyond yourself. Cisco had similar ones. So the way you keep culture is you articulate why it's important and you teach it every day. And you've got to put it down in ways that people understand, because the reason you all did this 10 years ago, people have forgotten why. And this is why you've got to reinforce it all the time. So I think it's huge that the culture that you all have done here so very well and attracted many of you students to it consciously or subconsciously continues to do well. But you've also got to realize the new dean, when she or he comes in, has to also say, what's my vision and strategy? What is the team I'm going to put together, professors, et cetera, to do this? What's the culture I want, and how do they communicate it? But if you do culture right, you make it so strong, the new dean will say, she or he, I want to adjust it and tweak it, not change it dramatically. Hopefully the same thing that Chuck decides at Cisco. Our culture, our founding principles, if you will, innovation first, customers first, and when in doubt, just do the right things. Don't do what's politically correct or benefits you. Great question. Please.
Hi, John. Thanks
Hi.
for coming. My name is Blakey, and I'm one of the
Pleasure.
co-presidents of the FinTech Club. And
Cool.
blockchain is a really popular topic
Yes.
right now.
Yes.
So I'm curious, thinking about market transformation. Chris Larson, the founder of Ripple, who was one of our Dean Speaker Series last year, said that blockchain is the next iteration of the internet in terms of the impact that it will have.
Yes.
So I'm curious your thoughts on that in terms of market transformation.
So I think blockchain is a technology that will be here to stay, but I think it's overestimating it to say it will be the next generation of the internet. I think the next generation is going to be all around digital and all around big data and artificial intelligence, and it'll be a combination of those technologies, in my opinion. If you're thinking about doing startups, you want to go for where the market's going to be 3 to 5 years out, not what people see today. Cisco went to the internet at the time people didn't even think the internet mattered. And by the time people realized it was important, we were so far ahead, others couldn't catch us. So I think in FinTech, I think really perhaps one of the most exciting area in the financial market is customer experience. And how do you differentiate your customer experience, not based upon call centers of the past that makes you feel like a convict when you call in. What's your social security number? What is your mother's maiden name, et cetera, to they automatically identify you. They basically do voice authentication in terms of the capability. They make you feel different. So in financial tech, I would probably jump a generation. I probably would jump to how you change that customer experience in the financial industry, which is not good today. And by the way, 3 of the companies I invested in go there, so I'm backing my money with what I'm saying on it. By the time it's obvious that technology is going to win, it's probably too late. So you've got to have the courage to take risk and then adjust your business plan as you go through it as a startup. Next question. Please.
Hi, John. Thanks for coming. My name's Claire.
Okay, it's a pleasure.
So I'm pretty interested in the company Zoom, which is a video conferencing
Yes.
software that's
Yes.
sort of spun out of Cisco.
Yes.
And their CEO took about like 75 engineers from Cisco with him to
Yes.
Zoom.
I'm not agreeing that it was 75, but I understand the concept.
Okay.
One of the lessons with press, whenever somebody gives a fact and you're nodding your head, the press will say you agree. And so back to facts versus emotion, you cannot agree, and you have to call them on that, but go ahead.
So I just wanted to hear a little bit about what that experience was like from your side.
Sure. So over the years, the neat thing about Cisco, how many of you are Cisco background, current or past? Okay. So you will find that we are so prevalent in the Valley, and we made 10,000 millionaires in my first decade of CEO. Unfortunately, probably will not occur again for a bunch of reasons in terms of tax treatment of options, et cetera. So we have a large alumni who have been remarkably successful and who've been trained in a pretty replicatable fashion in terms of how do you grow companies, how do you set audacious goals, how do you put customer first, how do you do a replicatable plan, et cetera. Zoom is probably one of 1,000 companies that have been indirectly or directly tied to Cisco. It's a good video conferencing type capability. If I were competing with customers, the way I would handle this is we've seen 100 Zooms. And by the way, 10 years later, how many will be here? And what we're doing in collaboration, you know where I'm going, architectures, data, voice, video, security must be a part of it, et cetera. But if I were doing the other way, I would say, what does Zoom do well? What trends did they get right? And how do they look to the future? And so I've always believed the competitors from Cisco would never be a large player, traditional competitor. We know how to beat those. I've always believed it was going to be a peer, like an Amazon, changing the model for how you deliver services, or a hot startup of which there are nearly 100 a year either coming at us from routing or switching or video conferencing or collaboration or mobility or security. And so I've watched the competitors more in what the customers like about them and understand the strengths and limitations on them. So I think it's a good area. I'm a huge believer that video will be the future in everything we do. And I think it will be virtual. When I do a demo of our boardroom, I talk about how we use all these technologies at the same time, including social media. And then I remind them this boardroom shouldn't exist in 10 years. It should all be virtual in terms of how you go about it. So I would say they're a good niche competitor in terms of their... Well, if you're in a market where you don't have good competitors, don't kid yourself, you're not in a good market. Secondly, if I had the Zoom team reporting to me, during my entire 20 years as CEO, I lost maybe 5 out of my top 100 people in total. And remember, the 100 people were different every 4 to 5 years. I had 7 heads of sales, 7 heads of finance, et cetera. So I hold the people pretty well. When you have some of your team leave to somebody else, you will want to candidly understand why does it occur. You usually have a problem in management in an area that you're not holding the people loyalty-wise. What's the number one reason you stay at a company? What's the number one reason you leave a company?
Believing in the mission, I would say.
It's actually your immediate manager. Then second is, do you believe in the mission? But for those of you who've ever changed companies, when you do the exit interview that you truly are doing a one-on, it's usually your manager or your manager's manager. Or they could have been good, but you lost faith in the company. That's the Valley. It's actually healthy. I think it's good. You know, in HP, the HP way, Lou Platt, when I first came out here, I called him up. I said, Lou, you don't know me. I'm from Wang. I used to manage 10,000 people. I'm now managing 400. I don't understand the Valley. Can I meet with you? He met with me. At the end of the meeting, what did I do? I got a reason to come back next quarter. At the next quarter meeting, quarter after that. 3 years of doing this, 3 years that he gave to me, and he let me bring my management team. I said at the end, how can I pay you back, Lou? Because now we really could. Cisco was on a roll, and we were tough. I thought he'd say, here's where you can help HP. You know what he said? Do it for the next generation. So part of what makes the Valley great is that flow of resources and creating the environment. Guess how many of my top sales leaders came out of HP? Almost a third. Because they were a great company, very similar to us in culture, We just brought them over and put them on steroids because we're much more aggressive in terms of the movement. The culture was perfect. So I think it's part of the Valley. If people aren't recruiting your people, if people in your own company aren't trying to steal your own team, that's a problem. It means you haven't got the right talent. So I think it's just healthy. What I watch is what's your voluntary attrition. Voluntary attrition in the Valley runs 15 to 20%. We at Cisco run 5%, give or take a point or two. As long as we're in that range, we're fine. If you have departments that begin to run 15%, you got a problem. Now you tell me on the timing how we're doing. We'll go until you say done.
Yep, one more question.
Okay? Yep. Now, one of the things I've learned is you never say one more question because you want to get the right question to close on. So I will say maybe one or two more questions, not to put any pressure on the question you're about to ask. But it's an important lesson. You always want to get your last question that allows you to close with the key takeaways that you want to do. And that is communication so important to do. Except usually I don't give my secret away. I usually say, maybe one or two more. Let's see how it goes. No pressure on you at all.
My name is Anna. Thank you so much for taking the time. Hopefully I have the right question.
Okay.
How do you inspire senior management to go beyond looking at the competition, to really aim at the big picture, at the big dream?
Yes.
How do you do that?
So it is a perfect one for the end, and you knew it would be. If you watch great leaders, what do? They outline a vision and strategy. They build the team around them to implement that vision and strategy, inclusion, change in them. They build a great culture, and they communicate all the above constantly. So it starts with communications. You have to outline the vision of where you're going to take your organization, whether it's a segment of a large company or even a segment of a startup or the whole startup, with what is your vision for where it's going to go. You have to, as a leader, inspire hope that is doable. Then you take hope and turn it into it's possible. And then you take possibilities and say that it's probable, and then you produce the results. So the way you do that is to outline your vision, to inspire hope, to get them excited, pull them close to you. Because leadership, if you say what has been my two things I do really well, maybe three, I get market transitions right, and I build unbeatable teams. I don't believe you should ever lose. Fearless. But I outline that vision and how it changes the world. I outline that vision and how it is something for France that nobody thought was possible, and then we did it. And so that's how I would do it. It's a great question to end on. Thank you very much. It's been an honor. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to John, and thanks to all of you for being here. Just a very quick comment, as I hear so much of what was in a talk like that, and obviously so much experience and distilled, and a frame that we all think about, right? Why do people miss market transitions? I mean, you have to ask yourself the hard questions. What is it we're missing? What is the profound change? Questioning the status quo is easy to say, but it's not easy to do. But that idea that there's got to be a better way to do this, right? So that lines up very well with what we talk about around here. He talked about overconfidence and the effect that that has on people. IBM, they became arrogant. Confidence without attitude serves us in life. It serves us in business. It's part of why we're so committed to it. World-class CEOs who want to be coached. If you're ready to be a CEO, you are very capable. And it is easy to forget that you still need to be coached. Students always. Even at the end of your career, do you know you still have some learning to do? And then, when we think about... And then, your being here is a service to us. You coach CEOs and startups because you love it. Do it for the next generation, another phrase, right? Beyond yourself. That's part of why we're all here. Thanks for coming today, okay?